Hello, everyone. Happy Friday again. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. Where did we leave off? I believe we were at a point where I crashed into the moon. And so today we're going to fix that. Let me just see what's going on with the stream here. It looks like I'm stuck with a NASA video, which I will do my best to correct. So I'll just turn on some of the Kerbal Space Program music as well, so you don't need to hear me swear at my computer the whole time. Thank you all for joining me, and unlike last stream where it actually wound up being Kerbal dedicated, I did have a plan to do a couple of other things, and had so much fun crashing spaceship into the ground that it became a full 4-hour Kerbal stream. So I might have two games to show you tonight, but we're going to start with some classics because today we want to get a probe on the moon. Let's see what I can do here. Oh, that's looking promising. There we go. Let me just get rid of that video in the background and we can jump straight in. And I had a coffee I put down somewhere. I'm slightly frightened as to where it went. In fact, I'm very sorry to do this, guys. I know I'm a little bit late starting, but I am going to take just a quick moment to find that. But not content to leave you with nothing, I am going to give you a shot of something I plan to fly into the sun. Back in a sec. Alright, sorry about the wait. Coffee is secured. The probe has a slightly better chance of landing on the moon. So, the story behind this fellow. In its current form, I am going to need to wait 211 days to hit apoapsis, at which point I am apparently going to find almost 7,000 meters per second worth of fuel and crash it into the sun. Not very realistic, but we'll do our best to find a better way. This is not our mission for today though, and I'm just going to take the edge off the music a little bit, although I know my settings should be a little bit quieter for you guys. So where we left last episode, we were attempting to get a Mun landing. Quite a bit of trouble getting some devices that would successfully go to the surface of the Mun, or in fact even achieve Kerbin orbit, largely because it was far too heavy thanks to some very helpful suggestions in chat, we managed to create something that was capable of getting to the Mun. And at that point, I proceeded to be a complete incompetent and crash it into the surface. So there's a couple things that we can do. Number one, we could review the design, because it did have a couple of things that made it a little bit difficult to pilot. Or alternatively, we can just accept that it's perfect for a probe and move into something a little bit more meaningful, like crashing it into the surface again. So the basic features of this thing, we've got 4 of our sort of main rockets to get us off the surface, and then of course this basically just huge long tube, which does break into 2 parts. But basically, this whole upper half is supposed to get me onto the surface of the Mun and back. The problem I ran into last time was basically it's very easy to tip over, as probably comes as a surprise to nobody. And of course, I was just careless as hell on that mission. I did not use my RCS thrusters as well. The one thing I will say though, that as far as I'm concerned, this is a completely inadequate ship to actually accomplish a Mun landing with a human or a Kerbal pilot. But that doesn't mean, at this point here, we're just trying to get something that can collect some science so we can maybe build something better. So at this point, I thought a little bit about this before I started the stream, and I think the best way to go, to be completely honest with you, is just to try again and don't crash it this time. If there's anything else to be done, I can sort it out there. There's only one thing about this current staging diagram that I'm a little bit concerned about. I've got this should be going down here, and this should not be deploying with the parachute. Okay, so launch, break the 4 off, start the main rocket, deploy parachutes. Okay, looks good to me. Let's see if it kept the action groups. That, but it didn't keep my temperature settings. I think I've kind of exhausted what I can for these in terms of what I can get on Kerbin, but it doesn't really cost a whole lot to put them on the ship. And certainly if there's any targets of opportunity I can pick up, that's just a little bit more science for me. I did put this antenna on here, and it would be wasteful not to use it. Whereas, of course, I want to be very clear that the crashing of this craft onto the surface of the Mun was not wasteful, because even, we'll call it an impact assessment, and that could be useful. All right, let's do the launch. Okay, turn our SAS. Nice bright day, and I'm just trying to remember the last week. Perhaps there's a word to be said in terms of the relative brevity of this stream, potentially. I haven't actually done any reading or any work on Kerbal Space Program since last week's stream. School has been definitely ramping up in terms of its, I won't necessarily say difficulty, but definitely its workload. And even though I have fewer classes than planned, they're definitely making sure that I work as hard as I can. So at this point, I think I don't want to abandon the stream. In fact, I think it's very important to keep a regular stream, because I certainly enjoy doing it, and I hope you guys enjoy watching it. But in terms of whatever problems I ran into in the previous episode, I don't really have any major way of I don't really have any bright ideas in terms of how to do things differently. Of course, I will probably work out, the obvious in terms of actually the full space travel. That I sort of there's the obvious part of crashing the ship. That part I kind of get not to do. But I Oh, excuse me for a second. I just want to see if I can do something about that Facebook noise, because I think that's going to be happening for a while. Close that. All right. I believe you have my full and undivided attention. Oh, nope, you don't have my full and undivided attention. Now you have my full and undivided attention. Okay. So basically, I certainly made, quote unquote, a mistake in the previous launch. So beyond repeating that one, there's not a whole lot extra that I can do in terms of changing what happened last time. And I'm not entirely happy with the upper part of this ship. But rather than redesign, it is always more fun to launch these things into space. So at this point, I think we'll just do our best with what we have and see where we go from there. And for the inaugural launch, we always need to find appropriate music. I just wasn't prepared. I do apologize for the breaks. I was struggling to try and make it for 7 o'clock, so I did not queue up any of the music. The one thing I will say about this stream that I do, regardless of any school pressures, is go through the 2 steps to hell that I have and find material that will be good for launches. So some of these are a little repetitive. I can't remember everything that I put through on the stream, but I know we haven't done this one before. All right, so we've been here before. For those who are new to the stream, we should maybe be explaining a little bit about what we just did. So I think the launching a giant rocket into the atmosphere part is fairly apparent to anybody tuning in, even if this is your first time. What may not be as apparent is these little maneuvers that I was doing while Skrillex was interrupting the launch music. The idea here is I'm going to be going at the highest point of my orbit, the apoapsis. I'm going to be firing into the direction that I'm currently going. The apoapsis, that high point, is going to occur. I'm going to hit that in about 1 minute, and I will be able to speed up the. Speed up time in the game. But the idea here is I'm going to burn in the direction that I'm already going, which means I'm going to, at this high point, I'm not going to begin my descent, but rather try and push myself into this circular orbit. And the best strategy I've sorted out so far has been to divide it in two. So actually at 21 seconds, I should be ready. So let's line it up. I'll probably be a little bit late on this, but all right. And while it's not the most visually compelling material, I do prefer to keep the map on like this for the maneuvers, just simply because I am a complete hack, and I would prefer my craft to survive where possible. And again, the orbit doesn't need to be perfect. I mean, as long as I don't crash back onto the planet, that's what matters. The blue lines represent my existing, my existing orbit, whereas the orange represent what I am kind of on course to do. Another word that I probably didn't mention before, especially if I'm going to be assuming that there are new people tuning in, which, with the exception of 1 or 2, is basically the entire viewership. This particular craft does not have a pilot. It's an automated ship. That's what all the solar panels on the top are. This is definitely not anything even remotely close to an efficient rocket. Oh, you know what? I didn't do any science on my way up, but that's fine because I have plenty of launches worth of science. I don't think I could have gotten anything out of that. But this is a probe. This is a completely automated ship, which is why it has so many batteries and solar panels. None of these designs are particularly aerodynamic, but the way that the game currently does drag is just it's a sum of all of these drag values on each of the parts, which gives the very odd situation in which if you add the cones on the end, so it's not a flat surface smacking into the atmosphere, but rather something that we traditionally consider more aerodynamic, you actually increase the drag on the ship. So clearly, with the game being in a beta or alpha or whatever they're calling it, that is something that has yet to be implemented. But I'm certainly taking advantage of it in terms of the design of my ships, and frankly, I need all of the help that I can get. So the maneuver that we're going to be doing, we're currently in orbit around Kerbin. Our intention is to land on the Mun, which is right here. I didn't want to do that. Let's set it as the target and focus our view back on Kerbin. So the name of the game here is not just to hit where the Mun is right now, but hit it at a place that it's, hit it in the place that it's going to be when I launch. Now, one nice thing about this tool is that I can put it in the general area of the orbit, and it actually looks like I'm on a pretty close guess. So right here it's telling me that I'd be 6,000 kilometers away. And what I can probably do at this point is just adjust the this. Oh, here we go. So the Mun will have passed me at that point. So if I just move along here, I get myself into a nice little Mun orbit. So I'll have an encounter, but that doesn't tell me a whole lot. Oh, that is because I will crash into it. So let's go back to the waypoint and see if we can take down some of the intensity of the maneuver. $58,000 on top sounds okay. So at this point, I'm going to need quite a bit of fuel to begin the maneuver. I'm definitely going to run out of what's in my current fuel tank, but I'm sort of on track to doing a pretty reasonable maneuver for getting into a nice Mun orbit. From there, I can worry about landing. So let's go to something a little more visually compelling just for the purposes of this maneuver, or at the very least so I can speed up time. What I want to do at this point is point my rocket at the waypoint that I've assigned. The pinkish purple, whatever color it's showing up as on your screen, is the actual target. And what I'm shooting for... Oops, went too far. What I'm actually shooting for is in blue. So at the moment, this is my retrograde vector. That would mean that is the opposite of where I want to go. But by the time I get around Kerbin, that will be prograde, which means I'm flying, much like the maneuver that I did before, I'm going to be flying into that. So the idea is I go out and around. Instead of continuing the orbit, I'm going to thrust. I'm going to use as much fuel as I can to push myself so that I expand my orbit around Kerbin, I encounter the Mun, and I get pulse basically into its sphere of influence. Now, the important thing is that if I leave it on its own, what I will do then is I will escape the Mun, I will escape Kerbin, and just begin probably orbiting the sun at some point, or I can't remember what they call the sun in this game. So that means I can't just simply be idle while this procedure happens. But what I do is I wait for the 15-minute mark to begin my maneuver, and then I just need to make sure before I go flying off into space that I fire in the opposite direction of where I'm going, so that I can establish that orbit around the Mun. We will take things one step at a time, though. We'll speed up a bit. I sadly am not going to go to the planet view, and that's mostly just so I can illustrate. Mostly just kind of illustrate from a top-down perspective of what's happening. And it'll be a little bit more convenient for the purposes of doing the maneuver so I can actually see my orbit widen. Now this is a little bit more complicated than the previous maneuver because I could rely on basically a full fuel tank in terms of burning. So, you know, my kind of made up rule of dividing the time that I spend burning in half doesn't really apply here because I'm going to be cutting off half of my ship, and I'm going to be using a smaller thruster, which means that I may be able to get quite a bit of force in the front half, but maybe I won't get as much in the second half. So at this point, it's going to be just sort of a bit of guesswork. I think maybe the 45-second mark might work, and I mean, I'm sure there's probably a formula that I can find on the internet somewhere that will tell me exactly how I should do something like this, but I have game theory and econometrics to study before orbital mechanics, I'm afraid, so I will save that for either your commentary in the chat, or perhaps Scott Manley will deal with this in one of his videos when I start watching them again. If you are interested in this game, by the way, I highly recommend Scott Manley's YouTube channel. It has a very nice little set of tutorials which kind of got me going in the game, and kind of past that point where I was getting frustrated with the fact I didn't know anything that was going on. So now I'm basically going full force into the prograde vector. I'm going to go to the this view because I am going to have to blast off the other half of the rocket. There we go. And looks like it's at minute 1, so I think even at 45 seconds I could have done better. But we can see our orbit is expanding, so at the end it does definitely widen out quite nicely. I tended to notice that the further away from the planet I was, so it's debatable that I could stop thrusting here and possibly spend a little less fuel trying to get to the Mun by going at this middle point, but I'd rather not chance it. I mean, I've sort of built the machine, and I've built everything on the assumption that this is what I need to do to get to the Mun. And if there's a better way, I'll certainly learn about it. But at this point here, I know I'm going to make it. I'm going to have, you know, probably about, what is that? 4/5 of my fuel tank. You know, I think it could be worse. So, all right, that's pretty good. So this is what my actual orbit is going to look like. At this point, I can actually start focusing on the Mun because it's going to tell me. Oh, that's definitely a little further away than I was planning. So I can. At this point here, it's a little weird to see the orbit around the Mun. Of course, this is going to be when I get to that point at the end. And sorry for the Steam alert. I think they probably just want Dota items, but I will check after the fact. Of course, if it's somebody watching the channel, I deeply apologize. I just tend to notice that is mostly why people want to talk to me on Steam. So the idea here is I'm kind of going quite fast. I'm almost missing the Mun. And so my theory here is that if I take the heat off a little bit, if I fire the opposite direction and so slow down, that's going to result in me getting closer to the Mun. Let's see if that happens. That will mean slowing down, of course, means firing in retrograde, the opposite direction of where I'm going. So my guess here is that I'm going to see this line go closer to the Mun. Let's see if that happens. That is the exact opposite of what happens. So still quite far away, actually. So I can afford to. It's still only 1 second of fuel, so I can definitely get quite close. Yeah, I'm happy with that. And what I can probably do, you know what? I won't plan my establishing my orbit. I think I didn't nail this. I didn't nail the maneuver the first time, so I might as well get some practice in. So it's going to take an hour before I can actually get to that particular location. I'll keep my focus on the Mun, but I am going to speed up time. And actually, before I speed up time, I should be focusing on the direction that I'm facing. At this point here, I basically just need 12.7 meters a second, and in this case it's almost certainly, one, because I'm further away from Kerbin, but also because it seems to be that I'm sort of just kind of following the direction I'm already going. In this case, I'll be burning either at prograde or very close to it, and so in this case here, I need very little. I'm not really fighting against anything to do this maneuver. I'm really just kind of following what I'm doing already, and what's going to be happening here. I actually think I see the logic in terms of why I was mistaken to try and burn in retrograde. I believe what's happening here is I'm trying to get a little bit closer to where the Mun is having an effect on me, so it sort of sucks me into its gravity a little bit closer. Now this is going to mean a fairly heavy fuel expenditure to kind of close that orbit, but again, that's something I'm willing to do, because it just means I spend less fuel trying to land. And I know the problem that I've had with landing in the past has been that I use up too much fuel just trying to maneuver around. So hopefully the RCS will help with that this time, but that's definitely my biggest point of difficulty with a Mun landing. And so anything I can do to sort of reduce that, I guess reduce the impact that that will have, will potentially result in a successful mission. So here we're just waiting a sped up time, but there's the 2-minute mark, so I could theoretically just fire this thing now, but I'm trying not to cause any problems for myself, so. Okay, firing. And this I kind of need to be careful on at this point. I'm just going to use the RCS. And all right, that is the best I can possibly hope to get. And using the RCS kind of threw me off course there, but oh wow, that is really close actually. I think I can handle that though. I suspect I can just probably try and turn that into my descent. It's definitely using a lot of fuel, but I think like that's a perfectly fine spot to land. So we'll speed up. This is going to be from the perspective of the Mun, so you'll just kind of see these two elements converge. And that's where I get sucked in. Now, what I suspect, if I think a little bit about this, I think what happens here is I get sucked in, so I'm actually going to be moving quite quickly at that point. What I could potentially do is actually try to fire. Let's see what happens. So if I try firing retrograde somewhere else, I think that was about 30 seconds of burn. That's 7 seconds. So let's try that and see what happens. Oh, not my finest moment. So basically here I'm kind of just designing it so I don't establish any orbit around the Mun, but rather just directly crash into it. Myself into retrograde, although I still have 4 minutes, so there's plenty of time. Yeah, so I went from about 300 to 517. It would have been nice to have a bit of an estimate in terms of what I would have been doing when I hit periapsis, but at this point we're experimenting. So the biggest one is I want to make sure that I slow down when I hit the Mun. Okay, so now I'm firing in the opposite direction of where I want to go, just so I can slow down, and that basically puts me on a collision course with the Mun. So get rid of that. And at this point, I'm just going to watch my ship get closer. A little zealous there, but yeah, and I'm really speeding up now, so I'm probably going to need to do a pretty intense burn in retrograde once I sort of know that I'm ready to do a vertical descent. I think I can start that right now, actually. Now ideally I'd work on the horizontal elements first. Actually, maybe we'll just try doing that now. Actually, I think it's probably better that I just try and drop down from where I am at this point. I can worry about making it elegant in another descent. It's also a bit difficult to judge distance on these things, so it definitely looks like I'm getting quite close, but I know I probably have some leeway. I am going to turn on the landing gear and the lights though, just so I can see what's going on. Okay, this is looking promising. What concerns me a little is I don't see my lights, and I don't really have the opportunity to check underneath. I think what I can do here is I can just try and get into a nice 2 meters a second. Okay, so the lights are on, and that just means I'm quite a bit higher than I actually thought I was. So I don't want to be careless in terms of how fast I descend, because there we go. Okay, and here I remember I unintentionally put a lot of horizontal movement in, so my job now is to make sure I keep that under control. This will be great because I'm sort of keeping a good 4.5, slowing down a little bit, which I'm a bit concerned about, but I think I'll have the landing before that becomes too much of a problem. So I'm just going to try and stay the course. Not crazy about that horizontal movement. Let's see if we can correct it. Not a fantastic landing. Let's see if I can use the RCS to... Nope, I think we'll just take our chances. We did it! Welcome to the Mun, ladies and gentlemen. Time to do some science. I could, of course, try and do some of this science in the upper atmosphere, but I don't quite know where the boundaries are in terms of what my original orbit was. Oh, it appears I'm leaking monopropellant, and that's probably to try and keep the ship up. So I'll just turn it off really quickly to see what happens. Cool. It stands. All right, well, because this is a machine, I'm out of things that I can do here. And so the name of the game is to try and find a way that I can use this the 141 fuel to get back home. Well, the first thing I can do is just launch straight up. Establish something resembling an orbit. Doesn't have to be perfect. That is, in fact, anything but. Okay, let's just cut the engines. I think I wasted a lot of fuel there, to be honest, but that's fine. We will correct this. Yeah, this is basically just a huge apoapsis. And it doesn't really make a lot of sense to just kind of fire in the opposite direction, so I'll just make this as best as I can. It's 27 seconds of fuel, which I'm not crazy about. Actually, I think at this point, I'm just going to try and conserve as much as I can and make sure that I make it around the planet and correct things when I go to Kerbin. That was a little careless of me just to fire up into the air like that, because it's going to make my job getting back to Kerbin a bit more difficult, but we'll see what we can do. One thing I can do as well is I can sort of cheat to use my monopropellant to establish orbits. Actually, that might be an idea here. Let's see what happens if I fire the monopropellant in prograde. I seem to waste a lot of fuel, so I'll give that a skip. and just worry about dealing with what we have. There may be a slight amount of frame drop that happens here. I'm just going to do this because it seems like the channel's pretty quiet at the moment, and I just want to test a little something about the stream here. So I apologize for an interruption in quality. I have about 4 minutes before I hit the point, so I'm trying something here for a second. So I do see there's some frames dropping at this point here. That's sadly the Maze Runner trailer that is obligatory to test the thing that I need. And we do have a little bit of time before the maneuver, so I'd like to try and do this on a break, but it's something that's been bugging me for a little bit. Doesn't seem to be working. Mostly I'm just trying to get a bit of an image of what you guys are seeing that isn't through the tool that I use called OBS. Normally this means that I need to soak up some of the bandwidth to view the video, but it's looking at this point that it's not actually loading the video for me. So if you guys are experiencing any kind of difficulty in terms of quality, if you can't hear anything, if you can't see anything, please let me know in chat. That's probably the best way to communicate something like that. Or you can try and send me a private message through something like Facebook, but that's a little less reliable. I think I think the best thing to do at this point is just try and do my maneuver. I'll let this thing attempt to load. And I guess the best thing I can say is if it completely fails, I'll deal with that later. Okay, well, I missed my burn, so that's one thing. Let's just fire and do the best we can. Definitely a lot of fuel I'm using. Okay, I'll live with that. Now the name of the game is to try and get home. I think the best thing to do here is just add a maneuver, fire out as far as I can get, and then just point it in the direction of Kerbin. Oh yes. Okay. Okay, so this is a bit of a shot in the dark here, but what I'm just going to try and do is escape the moon, or the mun, and see what I can do when I'm a little bit further away from its gravity. I am definitely going to wind up in an orbit around Kerbin. It's just a question about whether or not I'll have enough fuel to complete the maneuver that I want to do. So 13 seconds of burn isn't great for that, but hopefully I won't need to use a whole lot to correct everything. So I'll turn off my RCS because I do have 42 units of monopropellant, which will be helpful in terms of getting a little bit of extra push. But I want to at least try and get a point where I'm not really competing with orbits or gravity or anything like that. So here I'll wait till I'm at -7. So cancel that. Oh, that's interesting. I forgot I had to do another maneuver. Okay, so not a great orbit, but again, something a little bit better than what I have at the moment. I don't even know where the waypoint is for the... There we go. Okay. So some of the logic that I've been using for these maneuvers has been, I need to try and get out of these orbits. I'm going to try and get sort of in that nice little middle area where I was able to do some relatively inexpensive maneuvers, basically. And the hope is that by establishing sort of this wide orbit around Kerbin, I can try and take advantage of the distance to just nudge myself to the places I need to go. Now, this particular maneuver here, actually, okay, I got 1 hour, so I can always reset this if this doesn't work out. What I am going to try and do is maybe go even further at this escape spot, and I want to see if maybe I can reduce that even more. So fire and retrograde as much as I can. Didn't really improve that much, so I think I'll just stick with this kind of ugly looking thing and see if maybe establishing my new orbit will do that. The one thing I really didn't do, the one thing that's really not going to help me here is I didn't leave myself a whole lot of escape. At least the previous one, I would have had an opportunity to correct things if they went wrong, whereas here I've sort of committed to this maneuver. But that's fine. I think this is something I can manage. It is ultimately a 5-second burn, so again, I've been saying that a few times now, and I'm definitely running out of fuel, so I can't afford to do too many more of these, but this, I think, is going to put me in generally the place I need to go. Oh, now I really did it. Okay, so I'm just going to turn off my RCS and everything. I'm just going to let myself float into this orbit, and then I can deal with it later. So I did miss my apoapse, unfortunately. So I think what I can try and do here, I think the best thing, honestly, is just see what it's going to take me to burn prograde and get back to Kerbin. Definitely not ideal. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, or sorry, I didn't mean to say prograde, I mean retrograde. So what I'm going to do here is I do have some monopropellant left, not as much as I'd like, but at this point I can try and close the orbit a bit by just firing in the opposite direction. I can give you a little bit of an illustration about how it's going to do that. I've got these rockets on the side here. Oops. I hit N, it's just going to go in this opposite direction here. So I'm a little interested in just seeing how much, if at all, that changes anything. It's definitely bringing me closer, but I don't know. I don't think it's bringing me as close as I'd like. It is bringing the apoapsis closer though, so that will hopefully give me the last bit I need to burn retrograde using my fuel, and hopefully that will be enough. Cool. It's not going to be pretty, but it's going to get me on the planet with some fuel to spare. And so we will admire the majesty of space as we plan on crashing this thing onto the surface of the planet. Kerbin's here somewhere. Probably below. As you can see here, this thing is going ridiculously fast. That is basically because I can't even see my orbit. Okay, let's slow down. Okay then, I am orbiting the sun somehow. Is there an autosave I can go back to? Because this is not what was supposed to happen. Maybe it was going so fast the physics changed. It's F8. Okay, I'm just gonna need to take a second. Sorry, guys. So that's my crappy orbit. Well, you know what? Let's work with this. See if we can do better than what we did last time. It's a little frustrating, actually, because that was definitely going to pay off. The only problem is I don't remember how long I needed to burn for the... Okay, good. It's probably thrown my orbit off a little bit, but me some information that I needed. And I remember a bad habit of wasting a lot of Mana on propellant, so I'm just going to turn that off. Okay, well, stabilize and then turn it off. It's definitely my break time at this point, but I am committed to bringing this thing back to the planet, so I think I will just take a delay on the break, and maybe we'll try something else after this. We'll see how it goes. Okay, I don't see where this purple maneuver is coming from, so. Perhaps at 7. Okay, I think that's the best I can hope for in this current form. So I think what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to turn these off and get a little bit closer to my waypoint. At this point here, this is definitely an inelegant maneuver, but the whole idea is to just try and accelerate the escape that I'm already going on, and then just try and refine it when I have a little bit less gravity to worry about. So I suspect it is very fuel inefficient compared to other things that I could do, but I am sort of at a guessing point here in terms of getting this orbit. I mean, the nice thing is as long as I can get to apoapsis, I can really hammer on the rockets and just try and bring that thing closer to Kerbin. And ideally, as long as I don't waste too much fuel performing this maneuver, it should I should kind of be able to make up the rest of the orbit. No, that's no good. I need to change this maneuver. Why won't it let me? again, I'm melting through our monopropellant, which is not ideal. Let's see if this one turns out a little bit better. Okay, that's the best I can get. So let's see what happens here. Ah, I passed apoapsis, that's why. Okay, so ideally I'm not going to have to wait a whole couple of days. What happens if I burn retrograde here? I ran out of fuel. So, the best I can do here, I suspect it's not going to change a whole lot, but I can at the very least use up some of this monopropellant to close the orbit a bit. I don't want to use too much because I am still going to need to steer with this, but let's see what it does to the orbit. So if I burn in retrograde, what's it going to take me? I think I can handle 16 seconds. And I think I can do that burn right now, actually. Because presumably I'm closer to apoapsis, so it should be a bit more fuel efficient. Okay, that works for me. So, I mean, in real life, the problem with this is I'm going to be hitting the planet so fast when I get there. I do have some fuel to burn, and I mean, I definitely would not really want to have a bunch of fuel in the atmospheres that I could burn up with. But rather than admire the view of my ship, I'm actually going to make sure it's on its way to Kerbin. I'm going to say nuts to reality. I'll burn up as much fuel as I can just to make sure that I really do land on the planet. And hopefully we can call that for our successful, call it our successful moon, our Mun expedition. Okay. Nope, I forgot to put the landing gear down. Bit late now, I suppose. In fact, I'll be needing that shortly. So I think at this point here, it probably makes as much sense to just... yeah, you know, I'm going fast enough. This is just going to slow my descent a bit. Okay, works for me. I'm still going to land on the planet. I don't really have any monopropellant left as well, so I'll just turn to face the opposite direction, and we will let nature take its course. Speed it up for a little bit, at least until we get there. And we will enjoy the fireworks. I suppose that could have been timed better for the landing because we get to enjoy 400 meters of descent. Now, it's been a while since I've done some camera work, but I'm pretty sure that is a shadow being cast on the ocean floor, not the surface of the ocean. Of course, I am not commenting at all about the surreal looking parachutes. Oh my, look at that. It's a screensaver right there. I also apologize. I did not sleep very well last night, and I had a very early lab that I needed to attend to. Wonderful students in the lab, and I actually managed to pick up a couple of extra hours as well. But it sadly did come at the cost of my sleep because the transit system could definitely be improved in the area, which is not a great excuse. But, of course, in this sleep-deprived state, we still successfully made it to the Mun. What I am interested to see, though, is if at 4.4 meters a second a water landing is enough to tear apart my science modules. Place your bets, folks. We did it! Ooh. That is a damn shame. Looks like the science got destroyed. Let's see if we can recover any of it at the Space Center. Absolutely not. All right. All that effort we made to save the science, completely gone. It would have been better to transmit it. On that somewhat disappointing note, but of course we can still enjoy the sweet taste of success. I'm going to take my first break for the evening. Thank you everybody for tuning in. It's been some fun. We made it to the Mun. I think it might be an idea to change it up a little bit, play something else that I was planning to put on stream. So I will decide all of that in the next few minutes. I will give you a bit of 2 steps from hell, and I will take